guys, and welcome back to another Shadowlands Mythic Plus commentary video. This time we have The Other Side 17. This week is Fortified. It's the current week at the time of posting this video, so it's Fortified, Sanguine, Quaking, Prideful. So for this first pull, what we're going to do is I'm going to silence this Cultist right here before he starts casting anything. This is so that he'll run towards everybody, so that we can kind of group him up better without, having to like kick him again. We end up needing to kick him again, but he gets closer than you typically would. So now we just pop Lust, and we start blasting. So I should have saved my Shadow Crash there for after getting in Void Form, and then right there I get Shadow Locked because I start casting my Mind Seer like right as the Quaking finishes, which is unfortunate. But yeah, so on that first pack, I don't worry about getting Vampiric Touch on everything. I just pop Void Form, Shadow Crash, and then spam Searing Nightmare. Usually our Fire Mage is combusting, and our Windwalker right there was also doing a lot of damage, so usually it's not worth putting Vampiric Touch on everything because they're going to die too fast. So I just, like I said, I just Void Eruptions, Searing Nightmare spam. And then if things do end up living too long, I'll start putting Vampiric Touch on things, but typically that's not the case. So in this pack, it's another big pull. This is a really good dungeon for Searing Nightmare because of this. There's a lot of pulls like this where you have 7+ targets, and Searing Nightmare gets a lot of value on 7+ target pulls. So the thing we need to worry about here is the Death Speaker, the one that's casting this Erupting Darkness right now. That's a frontal, and it kills our monk. It can be very hard to see what direction that guy is facing, and he moves forward and starts casting a Sanguine right there, which is unfortunate. But it would be nice if we could figure out a better way to kite these mobs so that we don't have to keep running them through Sanguine like we end up doing. But I mean, we do a pretty good job. Like, only one thing has got Sanguine on it so far. That Bone Soldier gets a little bit right there, but other than that, we mostly avoided the Sanguine. So yeah, anyway, so I'm trying to Vampiric Touch at least the priority targets, and then outside of that, just Searing Nightmare spam for a 7+ pack like that. And then Shadow Crash, I try to save it for when I have all 3 of my dots up on the target, so I get the most benefit out of my Mastery. For anyone who doesn't know, your Mastery is called Shadow Weaving, I think, something like that. And what it does is every dot that you have on a target, you do X percentage more damage to that target. So my Mastery is 10%, so for every dot that I have on a target, I'm doing 10% extra damage. So you can go up to 30% extra damage for me. So, and when I stand in Tubbins and Gubbins, I've got 17% Mastery, so that would put it at 51% extra damage, which is considerable. So, pretty worth it to stand in Tubbins and Gubbins. Anyway, so on that guy, the thing you gotta really keep an eye out for, especially in these 17, 18, 19 keys on Fortified weeks, is that Rage. Usually we try to pop the pot right there that like stuns everything. We try to use that right as Rage is going out, because the Enraged Mask or whatever is not as deadly, the thing that spawns all the Tiki masks. That thing's not such a big deal, but the Rage will just completely kill everybody. So you want to save the stunning jar thing for the Rage. You got to start casting the jar before the Rage is even cast, or else it's not going to go off before the Rage starts hitting. So it can be a little finicky. I don't play Night Fae, so I don't worry about it too much. But if you are a Night Fae priest, you can click on that jar and stun everything. It just might take a little bit of practice to get used to the perfect time. Right here I get Shadow Locked again. You would think that after playing with Quaking for so many seasons, I would not ever get Shadow Locked, but I do. I would attribute some of it, at least, to still being not completely familiar with everything I need to do at all times as far as Shadow Priest goes. There's a lot of nuance to this class, and there are times where I'm like looking at my bars trying to decide what I'm doing, right? In that split second where I need to figure out, oh, is it worth it to cast Devouring Plague here, or should I save my Void Torrent for the next pack, etc., etc.? And so in moments like that, I can miss some of the mechanics on screen, like Quaking or the Prideful buff or whatever. So these Reaver dudes, basically the same thing. You want to dot them up and then just follow as your tank kites. They have a cast that this Undying Rage. So you need to be aware of that, because if you are running Surrender to Madness, then they don't actually die. So they'll go down to 1 HP and they won't die. So if you're running Surrender to Madness, that Undying Rage can be soothed by a druid, or Tranquilizing Shot works on it as well from a hunter. But if you Surrender to Madness on that guy and he's got that Undying Rage, you will die, because he doesn't die, right? So keep that in mind. If you have a hunter or whatever, then it's fine. But if you don't have anybody who can stop the Enrage, then I would say don't Surrender to Madness on it unless you're absolutely certain that it's not gonna cast that and kill you. On this pack, we've got those 2 Devoted dudes who just sit there and cast. You want to kill them before they get their cast off, or else it's pretty bad. And then you just hard focus the High Priest. This is a 4-pack we're moving into, so I'm going to put Vampiric Touch on everything. I should put a Searing Nightmare out. Yep, and then I'll Shadow Crash as soon as the Searing Nightmare is over. Yep, okay, so that's basically how you want to start this pull, and then just Searing Nightmare spam after that. Using your Dark Thoughts procs during your your Mind Seer, and then, yeah, refreshing all your dots as the pull goes on. Those hexes from the Hoodoo Hexer are pretty important to kick, because if you don't kick them, somebody's going to get hexed, and they're out of commission for 5 seconds. And it can be particularly deadly if there's other stuff going on at the same time. So you'll notice we didn't use the jar yet, and we won't use it for the next pull either. That's because the last pull in this hallway is by far the deadliest, so we don't care about these guys right here. As long as you can burn down the ads before they get their cast off, you can stun them, sweeping leg kick or whatever, all that stuff, Ring of Peace, everything works on those guys. For you, as a Shadow Priest, you can Psychic Horror them. I'm not sure if you can Psychic Scream them, but I imagine you can, because all the other CC works, but I'm not positive, so maybe test it out before you try. Okay, so yeah, we're finishing up this pull. We're saving the pot on the side there, because the next pack is more deadly, like I was saying. We chain it in because our cooldowns are coming up. I have my Void Eruption. I already used my Power Infusion, so one of the hexes gets off on our monk there. So we just dispel it real quick. That's something that you could dispel as well as a Shadow Priest. You have Mass Dispel, and Mass Dispel gets rid of magic debuffs, and it's a magic debuff. So right there, pretty much everybody gets hit by the Blade Storm thing, I think, and it almost kills like everybody in the group except for me. That's something that you need to be aware of. These mobs have this Blade Storm thing, so don't stand too close to them, or they'll kill you. Especially in a high key like this, they will one-shot you, so keep that in mind. Other than that, yeah, just keep Vampiric Touch on everything. Try to Searing Nightmare when stuff is close together. If your tank has to kite a lot, like this, then, hold your Mind Seer and maybe just Mind Flay a single target as it's running away. The only thing to be concerned about is Mind Flay slows whatever target it's on. So if your tank is trying to group stuff up, Mind Flay is gonna make that a little bit harder, although I don't know how much of that you can avoid, because you just need to Mind Flay it sometimes, so sometimes you have to just not avoid it. These spirit guys, the one that I just got rid of right there, they have a buff on them that you can dispel magic. If you do dispel magic, you take the buff and they instantly die. A mage can also spell steal it, but I think if a mage spell steals it, they die, so I would not suggest doing that. But you can also mass dispel it because it's a magic effect. or anybody who has a purge or anything can take it off of them. So this Manifestation of Pride, I usually try to save Vampiric Embrace for these, but I don't have it this time. And our healer has gotten a lot better at healing Pridefuls, so sometimes I just don't use it because our healer doesn't need it, and she's, handling everything. But if our tank has to kite and run away, because we have a Holy Paladin, she heals by staying in melee range. And so if the tank is kiting and she's trying to keep up, there are times where she has a hard time getting uptime on the ad or whatever, so she can't heal as well. And in those situations, it's really good to have Vampiric Embrace, because you don't have to be in melee range, so your uptime can be pretty high the whole time that he's kiting away or whatever. So right here we pop Lust and burn the boss to 50% within 20 seconds. That's pretty good. We're all doing almost 12k DPS. On this boss, it's just the single target rotation up until the ads start spawning, and then we hard focus the ads, because these ads, when he casts Blood Barrier, his barrier gets bigger the more ads are alive. So you want to kill the ads as fast as possible so that his barrier is as small as possible. That way you can kill him faster, obviously. These ads will fixate on people, so don't yell at your tank, because there's nothing he can do about that. And then right here, one of the things I have a really hard time with on this boss is watching my feet for those red swirlies. I'm colorblind. I'm red-green colorblind, so I have a really hard time seeing red in the first place. But in like a reddish, bluish, purplish room like this, it makes it really, really hard to see those red swirlies. So that's something that I'm working on. It's a conscious effort. It's like I can't make my colorblindness better, right? I can't fix it, but I can make a conscious effort to try and look for things that might be hard to see, So as long as you're like working on your weak points, right? That's how you get better at stuff. So right there, I gripped our healer because she's a Holy Paladin and she's super slow. Those hallways that are just long and straight are a really good time to use that. There's not a lot of times that Life Grip gets used in Mythic Plus, so if you can find little moments like that where, had I not Life Gripped her, she would be 3 or 4 seconds behind the rest of us, but because I did Life Grip her, I save us 3 or 4 seconds or so of her having to run through that hallway. Okay, and then right here, this Enraged Spirit patrols a little close for my liking. I'm pretty sure you could just walk through here, but we'd rather not risk it, because if we pull that guy, it's just an instant wipe, especially with everybody so far away. And there's no point in pulling him, and there's no point in risking it, because the stuff that we lose for not risking it, I mean, if we don't risk it, we lose a couple seconds. If we do risk it, and he does pull, it's a wipe. So we would much rather lose a couple seconds by not risking it than potentially wiping the group. So that's why we made that decision right there. So okay, then we just have this single target dental drill. I should be Shadow Word painting him. Yeah, and then this haywire thing. This haywire is a line of sight thing, and it has like ticks throughout the channel. So after one explosion, if you go back and watch, you'll notice I did it one time. I had a Void Bolt ready, so what I did was I hid behind the thing, it exploded once, I dipped out and Void Bolted real quick and dipped back in before the next explosion. That's something that I'm fine with doing in lower keys, and you can actually like dip in, it explodes, you dip out, hit him with something, dip in, it explodes, and you do it over and over for every single tick, and you won't take any damage if you do it correctly. But in a higher key like this, it's one of those low reward, high risk plays that is just not worth it. Kind of like walking past that mask before. You lose very little, but you could potentially lose a lot if you did it and you failed. So okay, then right here, this ARF guy, 4RF-4RF, will cast Woof on people. There's nothing you can do about that. I'm standing really far away so that the circle it casts on me is nowhere near people. That way they don't have to dodge anything, because I already pre-dodged for them. The star guy that I was focusing right there, the Headless Client, they'll cast a thing called Spinning Up. after their channel finishes, they have like 4 or 5 stacks of, I think it's called spun up, maybe it's called spinning up. But after it finishes, like right now, he's got 3. You can, what's the word? Dispel magic that, and it will stop. So this cast right here, they start the cast, and then if you dispel magic while they're casting it, it'll stop them from casting it. So that's something to keep in mind. But I mean, while they're casting that thing, they're not doing anything else that could be more deadly, so it's not a huge deal. But just something to keep in mind if you're ever looking for a time to, stop their thing. Okay, so here, this is another line of sight guy. Let's see if I do it at all on this one. Yeah, so I dipped out right there. I put Devouring Plague on him. Yeah, and then, I'm just doing my single target rotation. So, keeping all 3 dots up, Void Torrenting when I can. I should probably pop my cooldowns because it'll be at least 2 minutes before the next boss, and that's when I would really want it. But I end up not popping my cooldowns here. We haven't run the other side very much on a hierarchy like this. In fact, I don't know if I've run it more than 10 times at all. So I'm still trying to get used to when to use my 2 minutes and my minute and a half cooldown. That's one thing that just comes with time, I feel like, with practice. Or I guess if somebody else figures it out, then you can learn from them. But in my case, I just have to get used to when to use them, and it varies depending on your group. So some groups may kill certain trash packs faster than other groups, in which case you should not use your cooldowns there when you may have used them there on a different group. So I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, but it's using your cooldowns correctly is like the biggest thing that separates people who can time 15s from people who can time 19s and 20s. So, in my opinion, that's like the biggest thing. Obviously, there are other things, but if you can just line up your cooldowns correctly, your overall DPS will go so much higher than if you mess up your cooldowns. So, if anybody watched my Mists of Tyrannus Scythe video that I did, the in-depth, like hour-long video, I talked about that in there. That was a really good example of not timing your cooldowns well, and it really affecting my overall DPS. So right there was like the worst 3 really bad things happened in a row. We got hit by the lubricate, and then I stepped into a sanguine pool, and then as I walked out, I had the debuff on me that says that I can't jump, and I jumped. So that was like just some really, really micro mistakes that I could do better. And then we have an engineer in our group, in case anyone's wondering why the sludges had stopped for a while there. We had an engineer in our group, and there's a red button right when you go through the door. If you take a straight left, there's a red button that an engineer can interact with. You don't even have to be a fully leveled engineer. You just need to have engineering rank 1, and you can click on that button and it'll stop all of the slimes. And then the thing that I'm doing here is these guys will cast essential oil on people, and I have a weak aura that's telling me on their health bars who they're targeting. So I'm standing right here next to this corner so that if multiple are targeting me, like right there, I can, line of sight around the corner. They won't hit me with it, and we can completely ignore that mechanic, or at least a little bit. I don't know if that's something that all ranged should do, and it's not a huge deal if you have a lot of kicks in your group, but these guys just chain cast it. So, I mean, it's damage that's 100% avoidable. So if you just line of sight on that door right there, you're going to make the healing a lot easier. You're not going to take as much damage. The only problem is that you lose a little bit of uptime, but that's why I'm watching all the health bars to see, maybe I don't line of sight when there's just 1 targeting me because it's not so deadly, but if all 3 are targeting me or even 2 of them, then maybe that's a good time to dip behind the corner and not take all 3 at the same time. Especially if you're lower on health. If I have like very little health, then I'll dip if even 1 is on me. So right here, Quaking really trolls us and I almost die. I mean, I don't know what else you could do about that. It's like really hard to spread out because all the oil or whatever is pouring out of the pipes. So maybe keep track of when Quaking is going to come up. I know there's some weak auras out there that like show you when the next Quaking is likely to happen. if you have one of those, then maybe you can be like, oh, Quaking's going to come up in the next 5 seconds. I should not go onto that pipe because, we want to avoid it. So right here, something that I didn't know, but I learned in this key. What's her name? Maleficent Manastorm. She will throw little spear things at the closest target. So I was standing closer to her than our tank, and she was throwing them at me. That's completely avoidable. So our tank mentions it. He says, hey, Healy, get on the other side. And so I go get on the other side, and then he starts taking the damage instead of me. And it's great. So make sure your tank is standing towards where she's positioned, and then you stand on the opposite side. And in the situation where your tank is like gonna die and he's having a really hard time, you can even step over to that side to help him take less damage. So just something to keep in mind. Right here, our healer's trying to get a B-res off on the monk, so I take over on the squirrels a little bit. And then another thing that I learned in this key, if your tank turns off nameplates and just spam clicks on Maleficent, spam right clicks, then as soon as the squirrels go out, he'll insta disarm them. So as long as your tank doesn't mind doing that, see like right there, that squirrel came out, but it was automatically disarmed. That's because our tank is just sitting there spamming right click on her. You'll see it on this one too. It just disappears immediately. That also helps so that your healer doesn't have to run out and do it, or anybody else, I guess, but usually it's the healer who has to end up doing it so that you get uptime from the DPS. But that's just a tip that you can do. It might be pretty tedious getting your nameplates set up to where you can turn them off like that and not have such a hard time getting them back or whatever for the next pack. This laser thing, you want to make sure you and the other person who has it on them are on opposite sides of the boss. You want the boss to be in a straight line between you and that other person, just so that when it does that Z, the rocks come up and hit the boss. Millhouse will cast Diabolical Doom, and if you don't hit him with the laser, it will kill everybody. So you want to make sure that you hit him with the laser because it stops his cast. So right here I'm going to grip the Paladin again. This is another time where she's maybe 3 or 4 seconds behind us, so I grip her to catch up. You'll also notice if you go back and watch my grips, every time I grip her, Quaking is happening at the same time, but I recognize it, and I know that her Quaking circle is going to land on my Quaking circle if I grip her, so as I grip her, I'm running to the side to avoid that damage. That's just a little micro thing, like an awareness thing. You need to be aware that when Quaking is coming up, and if you have it, etc., right? Because that's a little thing, but it saves her, however many seconds it takes to heal me up, and it's just those micro improvements that you should be looking for at all times. So that's the rage that we want to interrupt with the pot. I don't think there's a pot on this platform though, so we end up taking just a ton of damage. I wish I had the HPS meter up so that you could see how much healing our healer is doing through this, because it's pretty insane. It's like 8k, 9k, maybe 10k. I have no idea actually how high it is, but it's a lot because it almost kills everybody, but we managed to stay alive somehow. So this is a 6-pack with a 1 priority target being that Death Speaker guy. So I'm gonna put Vampiric Touch on a bunch of stuff. It looks like I only put it on 3 things, and then we use the pot on these guys, and then I cast Void Eruption. Yeah, and then I'm just spamming Searing Nightmare, watching for that frontal that's super hard to see, and then that's basically the whole pull. You want to try and kick Shadow Cores when you can, and anything that you can kick. The Dark Lotus is not such a big deal because it's easily avoidable, but other things like if they're casting in a Sanguine pool like that Cultist was right there, that's a great time to interrupt it so that it gets out of the Sanguine pool. But yeah, other than that, one thing to be aware of is try not to stun things with Psychic Horror as stuff is dying, because if you stun something and then something dies right beside it and it creates a Sanguine pool underneath it, then it's going to heal up, and you don't want that. So, yeah, so hold off on your stuns for when stuff like that is happening. We get another frontal here. I don't know, it's just single target while we focus this guy down, refreshing my dots. I cast Shadow Word Death there, and then as it was hitting, I cast Desperate Prayer on myself. That's just to give me more buffer for when I take the damage. And also, I have the Conduit that heals you, that makes Desperate Prayer heal you for a certain amount. So, whenever I'm taking a lot of damage, Desperate Prayer is already a good defensive cooldown when you're taking a lot of damage, because it gives you more HP. It's like a 25% of your max health heal immediately. But I also have the Conduit that makes it heal for more over time. Right there, I Door of Shadows into our Paladin, and we get the Quake, but it's not such a huge deal. Yeah, so the other Conduit I'm running is called Translucent Image, and that means it makes it so that every time you fade, you take, I think, 5% less damage? Something like that for the next, like 5 or 6 seconds, something like that. So right here, I pop all my cooldowns because we got this giant pull. Yeah, so anyway, I pop my fade as a defensive cooldown rather than just to get rid of threat. That's because of the Translucent Image, which I think drops off of Sire Denathrius, so if you don't have it, it's not a huge deal, and there are other alternatives, like the Conduit that makes you take less mana for Mass Dispel. That's a good Conduit to run. I've seen a lot of people running that one. The one that shields you for like 9% of your shield whenever you shield an ally, that's a good Conduit. But the two that I run right now, at least, are Translucent Image and the one that does the Desperate Prayer thing. So now we're moving on. That was like a really big pull. This is a great time to have your cooldowns, is here in the Night Fae land Ardenweald wing, because usually you do pretty big pulls here. Like that first pull was a 4-pack or something, because everything is not very deadly. Yeah, so I like to pop my Power Infusion, my Void Eruption, everything, and just start, blasting the damage. You got to keep in mind that you've got circles falling on the ground like this all over the place, so watch your feet. This is another room where it sucks to be colorblind because everything is blue and these guys drop blue circles. So it's like, how am I supposed to see them? I honestly wish that it was just like a cardinal rule that swirlies would be like in Halls of Atonement on the boss that has the volley of power right after Echelon, the third boss in the dungeon, second to last. That one used to have red circles on beta, but it's a super red room and they changed them to be orange circles, and it's like a lifesaver for me. So I wish that was something that was more common, was them making swirlies that were easier to see, at least. Not the exact same color as the floor all over the place. And I guess some of that can be prevented by us pulling them into places that are not the same color, but also it's not that big of a deal, and it affects a pretty small percentage of the player base, so you learn to live with it, I guess. One thing I will mention on the topic of colorblindness is if you're ever in a group with like pugs and you don't know if anybody's colorblind, this is just a PSA. If you have markers like this, like right now we have a yellow star on the target I'm targeting, if you're trying to call for like a kick or somebody to attack that guy, it's a lot better for me if you say star than if you say yellow. I know pretty much what all the colors are now because I've played the game so much, but usually if there's like there's a circle and a star and they're similar colors, right, yellow and orange, so it's harder for me to differentiate colors than it is shapes, right? So if you're in a random group and you don't know any of the people, maybe try calling, hey, kick star, rather than, hey, kick yellow. Just in case anybody is like, is the star yellow or is the circle yellow? I'm not sure, right? Also, anytime you're like trying to say, hey, go to the blue thing, if you can use like a shape, it's, you know, a lot better. So just a PSA, as a colorblind guy, that would be helpful. Not a huge deal for most people. So right here, I'm casting Searing Nightmare on everything. It looks like 7 mobs. So I'm not going to put Vampiric Touch on pretty much anything. Right now I start Vampiric Touching stuff as he's running away, because Searing Nightmare is going to get less value as stuff gets spread out. So that's a great time. While stuff is getting spread out, if you don't have Vampiric Touch on stuff, that's a great time to use it. And then he kites right back to us, so yeah, I'm just Searing Nightmaring stuff as I can. Make sure you jump every so often. If you see this debuff on our whole party, the Paladin, the Monk, and the Tank have it right now. I think it's Sporadic Shimmer, something like that. It stacks, and once it hits 10 stacks, you get stunned. And you can get rid of it just by jumping, so don't worry about dispelling that off of people. If your voice comes with them, just say, jump. Or if you're in a pug or whatever, you could type it. Just say, jump, so that they know to jump and not get put to sleep by that thing. Okay, so yeah, we're finishing off this guy. There's going to be, I think, 2 more pulls before the boss. And then this boss is pretty scary usually, and I don't fully understand all the mechanics on it yet. Like the electricity thing that jumps between people is really deadly on Tyrannical, but not such a big deal on Fortified. So that's like one thing that I wasn't sure going into this key, if I was going to have to, you know, be worried about that a lot or not worried about it at all. But we end up just trying to pass it between the melee, so our tank, our monk, and our healer. But there are a couple other things, like the bomb that goes on people, the beams that go on the ground, all of that stuff. So this was a 5-pack right here, so it would have been good to put Vampiric Touch on pretty much everything. But I'm also a little starved for haste these days. I used to have like 20% haste, which felt really nice, and it made it really easy to put Vampiric Touch on everything. But recently, the upgrades I've been getting have been like I just got the neck off of Altimore, which is Mastery Haste rather than Haste Mastery. So it's like 140 Mastery and only like 40 Haste, something like that. Whereas the neck I had before was 140 Haste and only like 40 Mastery. So I lost a lot of haste and I gained some mastery, right? And that makes it harder to put Vampiric Touch on everything. So if I'm wanting to do some damage on the pull, there's a line between putting Vampiric Touch on stuff and just Searing Nightmaring, because you don't have enough time to do damage otherwise. So usually, and as time goes on and you get more haste, Vampiric Touching things on pretty much everything, as long as there's less than 7 targets or 8 targets, something like that, you should do it. And you're just lazy if you're not and you're playing badly. And I use my low haste as an excuse, like that's something I just should be doing. But you know, as time goes on, it'll become easier and not such a big deal. Okay, so now we're moving into the boss. I've got my cooldowns lined up. I have my potion. Let's see how we do. I pop my potion on pull. I pop Power Infusion and my Shadow Fiend at the same time. Yeah, and then I'm just going into the single target rotation. I get into Void Eruption as fast as possible to get the most out of my Power Infusion. I'm running Hungering Void, so I'm spamming my Void Bolts whenever I can. I Shadow Crash right there, because it's not bad on single target. And then, yeah, I'm just spending my Insanity whenever I can. As we get to the end of the Void form here, it's probably good to save your Insanity. Don't Devouring Plague immediately, because you want to save your Insanity so that you can cast a Devouring Plague as soon as the other one is falling off, rather than immediately after the first one. You want to try and have all 3 dots on the target for as long as possible, and when Devouring Plague is about to fall off, it's sometimes better to, like I said, hold your Insanity. Right here, as the boss dies, I click the portal, so when Bwonsamdi starts taking everybody's mojo like that, I'm flying away, right? So that's a little thing that you could do that would save a decent amount of time for your whole group, is if everybody stacks on that portal at the very end, you can click on that thing and just ignore the mojo draw thing that stuns everybody for a couple seconds. Our mage almost catches up to me right here anyway, because he's just super fast. But, I mean, it's a pretty good time save. I'm usually way behind the DH and the monk and the mage, and right now I'm ahead of them, so it's worth it. Obviously, it's going to be hard if you have melee, but you could tank the boss over there, and then as soon as the boss dies, everybody clicks, but just something to be aware of in case you don't know about it. Okay, so moving into this boss, on high fortified weeks and high tyrannical weeks, it's very important that you don't pop your cooldowns on pull. So when you get split into your separate platforms, that's when you need your cooldowns, especially on a high tyrannical, because like last week we did a 16 or a 17 of this. It was tyrannical, and I didn't have my cooldowns when we got separated to those other guys, and I couldn't kill my guy in time. So right there I get some unfortunate lag, which is super annoying, and but nothing you can do about that. Anyway, yeah, so you want to save your cooldowns, that being your Power Infusion and your Void Eruption, and if you're running Shadow Fiend, you should save that too, for when you get separated into your phases, because otherwise you won't be able to kill them. So, and it's very, very important that all 4 of them die, because if they don't all 4 die, and you don't get all 4 totems, then you're not going to one-phase the boss, and this boss you want to one-phase. You can one-phase it pretty much on any key difficulty so far. I don't think any group has run into a difficulty where having all 4 of the Bonsomdi guys and all of their damage and everything, they're not able to one-phase it. But there is a chance that on like plus 26 Tyrannical or something, it's not doable. But for now, it is. So, save your cooldowns and then pop them on this guy like I'm about to do here. So, I was spamming my tab button right there because you can target this guy before he actually appears. So if you spam tab, then you'll get his health bar as he's coming up, and you can start doing damage to him like half a second before he actually shows up. So on this week, maybe I didn't need my cooldowns here, but it's not worth risking it. So always save your cooldowns for that. Always, always, always. Because you don't want to be the guy who says, whoops, I didn't kill my guy, and now all 3 of you did, and we have to do it 2-phase anyway, so whoops, So don't do that. Also right here, as you're getting thrown across, you can cast Shadow Word Pain or Shadow Word Death. So as he's throwing me over to the platform, I'm spamming tab and my Shadow Word Pain button, because it's, like I said, a half a second or so of time that you can do DPS. Okay, so that's the end of the key. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll have a Halls of Atonement 18 that I'll be posting in the next couple days, so keep an eye out for that. And also, this week, we're going to be pushing like crazy, so I'll be streaming a lot on Twitch. So catch me there if you want. The link is in the description. And keep an eye out for, more keys coming out, because hopefully we'll time our first 20 this week. That's the goal, so who knows if we'll be able to do it, but if we get a 20 Mists of Tyranid Scythe, I'm pretty sure we can, so keep an eye out for that, and wish us luck. Catch me on Twitch, and I will see you guys later.